Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. Welcome to Monday Morning Mindset. I'm Erin from Girl Catch Fire, and we do this every week, Mondays at 10 o'clock. I just come on here. I'm a midlife coach. I help people, women especially, get unstuck on purpose at midlife. And on Monday mornings, I like to just show up here and give you some help with things that I'm working through that I feel like there's a good chance you're working through as well. So that's what we're doing here this morning. So I've linked this in the show notes, but last week I was somehow came across this little clip from The Office, the American version of The Office with Steve Carell and the crew. And it was from their final episode. And Andy Bernard, who's a character in the show, he said something interesting and it was banging around in my head for a couple days. And usually I know that's a pretty good indicator to talk about it here. He said it was the end of the show and it was wrapping up and everybody was going on to other things. And Andy Bernard says, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you actually left them. And it's a bit of a stab in the heart. You think, oh yeah, that's true, isn't it? I wish there was a way to know that I was in the good old days before I left them. I don't know if anybody is feeling that way right now, but I figured let's talk about it today. So, unfortunately, I fell down a little internet rabbit hole because I just followed a Reddit thread to see what people were saying about this. And some people said some pretty interesting things. I just wanted to share them with you. There was somebody else quoted Lester from The Wire, which is a show I don't watch, but another TV character. He said, "A life, you know what it is? It's the shit that happens when you're waiting for moments that never come." And to me, that's a little bit related to Andy's quote. And then, continuing down the Reddit thread, the Reddit rabbit hole, somebody says, if you have more than 12 contiguous hours of this is excellent, you're in the good old days. And I thought that was pretty smart too. So, interesting thing is like, why do we do this? And, as ever, when I'm talking about these things, I'm almost always talking to myself. And I realize that a lot of the things that have happened to me over the last 5 years or so were the good old days. And I'm realizing that in hindsight. But I remember at the time being unbelievably anxious and striving for something different while I was in the midst of what I would call the good old days now. So why am I like this? Maybe this is resonating. Maybe you feel the same way. That maybe you're like this too, or you feel like Andy, like, I wish we could know we're in the good old days before we leave them. So I think what it is, at least in part, is this idea that I've been dragging around for years that I work with constantly, which is this idea that it's never enough. What I have is not enough. What I do is not enough. My work is not enough. And so I have to be anxious about the future and I have to strive really hard now to make things happen. Gosh, see that big breath I just took? It's almost like I just told the truth there. And maybe you've experienced a similar thing. And so the consequence of that is, of course, I'm looking back and I'm saying, wow, maybe I was in the good old days, but I missed it while it was happening because I was so busy being fearful about whatever is next or striving to handle everything because it's all on me. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. Maybe you have that problem. Maybe you don't, but that's what we're talking about. So, the obvious answer for me when we talk about how to recognize when you're in the good old days is present moment awareness, like being in the moment, being present. And I know you're like, yeah, I've heard that a million times, but how? And sometimes it's not as easy as people want to think. It's not easy at all. But I'm starting to wonder, like, what if present moment awareness isn't just a good mental health strategy, but is actually a moral imperative? And the reason I was thinking this is something I caught somewhere on the news. And believe me, I have limited all media consumption severely. And I recognize I've privileged to do this. But I think it's important right now to really consider our use of media and social media just because there's so much uncertainty and there's so much wildness going on. So, but I did catch a video and it was in Gaza and it was a woman who had just come home from the market to discover her home had been bombed and her whole family was killed. And the video was actually in real time, like catching her receiving that information in the moment. And the thought that I had about that, I have many thoughts about that. Um, but the thought that I had about that was like, wow, it may actually be a moral imperative when you are when someone is demonstrably not in the good old days to choose to see your good moments and your good days in real time as a way of holding space, holding energetic space. Because the reality is like if I'm so wrapped up and I'm so self-centered and so busy thinking about all the ways and all the things I'm afraid of and all the ways I need to strive and etc., I'm not really paying much attention and holding much space or prayer for that woman. And I would like to do that because I like to be the kind of person that does that. All right. So, yes, present moment awareness is a great mental health strategy, but I'm also starting to think as the world teeters and careens and things feel very uncertain, we have to have ways to be able to stay centered and hold space for other people, energetically or otherwise. So, yeah, I mean, maybe it's even a little bit cruel of me to be like worrying myself into misery about the things that I'm anxious about or the things I'm worried about or whatever when actually I'm in the good old days. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today is like, how do you recognize basically the good old days while you're in them? So the other problem I will say, I mean, really, it's a self centeredness problem. And I have it, and all humans have it. But the irony of self centeredness is really this like, it should be the easiest time to recognize the good old days, but we don't. And there's reasons for that. Like maybe you're like me. It's like, okay, yeah, this is good, but there's more. I want more. I want this. Oh, okay, this is great, but I want more. And it's this striving. And let me just say something about striving and achieving. Just so don't hear what I'm not saying. Like achievement is great. Like working hard for stuff is wonderful. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the motive underneath it. Like why are you doing what you're doing? And if anxiety is involved and feeling like you're not enough is involved, and that's a red flag that the motive underneath what you're doing could use some examination. All right. So this obsessive self-focus is just not something that's going to be super helpful for me, but we're conditioned to it. Right. And also like we live in it's culturally conditioned and rewarded that we strive in our culture. What's next? What's the next thing? Like, always forward, forward, forward. And again, don't hear what I'm not saying. There's value in that, but the motive matters. So, one straight strategy I want to give you today comes from Tony Robbins. And he does a brilliant job. And I teach my clients this one all the time. He has 3 questions to help us get into present moment awareness, which I think is the key to recognizing the good old days. So, you might want to write these down, but the 3 questions he asks is, are you focused on what you have or what you lack? That's question number 1. Are you focused on what you have or what you lack? Question number 2, are you focused on the past, the present, or the future? And question number 3 is, are you focused on what you can or cannot control? And if you're answering those questions with honesty and intention, at least in my experience, the result is you snap back to right now. Especially if you're focusing on what you have, it can be overwhelming, all the good things that are going on. And this is, I think, what I don't do when I find myself anxious and striving and time traveling. I'm thinking into the future and I'm working the angles and I'm, operating from this place where nothing I do is ever enough. So, what do you think I'm going to get with that behavior? Probably just more of what I've already got. Okay. But if I could ask myself these questions, wait a second, where am I focused right now? Am I focused on what I can or cannot control? Often it's what I can't control. Um, am I focused on what I have or what I lack? And am I focused on the past, the present, or the future? So those are really good questions for us to ask ourselves. That's a start. Now, you know, if you've been here for a while, you know that I'm a believer. I'm a Jesus gal. And so that's always a stop for me. Like when I feel like I'm trying to solve a problem, I'll go to the scriptures to find out how everybody else solved it or attempted to solve it. And so in this case, I was kind of drawn to the Apostle Paul, who this is one of my favorites, but he said, like, I know what it is to need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret to being content in any and every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Probably you've heard that before. That one's all over the place. But to me, in this context, when I think about this, I think, oh, yeah, my focus is entirely in the wrong place anyway. I still think that I'm the source of my strength. And as a believer, I don't have to be. I actually I'm able to rely on the trans-rational source of all creation, also known as God, to help me. So maybe that means that I can just live my life and be enough as I am and do my work and work hard and enjoy myself and leave the outcomes to God. And when I'm thinking like that, I find myself being a lot more attentive to what's happening in real time. But when I'm anxious and when I'm striving and I'm running to like, because I got to do everything in my own strength, I miss things. And that's what I don't want to do anymore. I don't want to miss stuff. I don't want to look back in 5 years and say, wow, that really was the good old days, even though that could happen. Circumstances could create that. I don't know. It could happen. I also looked at King David and Psalm 23. Even if you're not a person of Judeo-Christian faith, you've certainly heard Psalm 23 because they preach it at funerals. And there's a part of it where King David, probably being pursued by King Saul or any of the other number of people that were trying to kill him, he says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. And your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Grab hold of that. Because again, when it's all on me, I'm like a little sheep running around organizing my grazing, which there's some value in that. That's important. I still got to do that. But what's the motive underneath it? It's because I think I don't have any help, because I don't have a shepherd. I do have a shepherd. What the heck? I do have that. I want to be here now. I want to be able to see what's here now in front of me. I want to know that I'm living in the good old days before I leave them. And the only way I can do that is if I'm aware of what's present. And the way that I get more aware is by trusting, like checking my focus, like Tony Robbins suggests, and then trusting that I'm not doing this all by myself. What a gift. It's such a gift to me. And I get that it's a choice that I make to believe that God has got a rod and a staff comforting me, guiding me, and protecting me. It doesn't even say protecting, I don't think, in the scripture. I thought it did, but it doesn't say that bad things aren't going to happen. Like we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Like that's part of it, but you're also walking into green pastures too. So I guess what I'm saying today is check your focus. No, start off by checking your motives. If you've got like a lot of anxiety and striving, you could be forgiven for having anxiety right now. There's a lot of anxiety producing stuff going on in our country, 100%. And Who do you trust to guide you through it? That's a good question. And where's your focus? Are you focused on what you have or what you lack? Are you focused on the past, the present, or the future? Some of us are time traveling 6 months in advance. Sorry, we don't get to do that. We can make plans, but spending too much time in the future is what is anxiety producing. Okay. And then are you focused on what you can or can't control? And then also, when things are too big, when things are too hard, who are you relying on? I say all this because I was going to do this money mindset this morning from my porch because I want you to hear my birds. They're not my birds. They belong to themselves, but we have beautiful birds here and they sing like crazy and it just indicates that spring's probably coming. And I want you to hear them, but it got chilly, so I bagged that idea. But that's one thing. Don't miss the birds. Don't miss the birds. I hope you have a wonderful day.